The hand we're going to show you today is ridiculous. I guess that's the only way I can say it and give it true value to what it is, because this hand is insane, and that's why so many of you guys suggested it.
Yeah, this is actually our most suggested hand ever. Look at all the names of people who suggested this on Twitter. By the way, if you have a suggestion for the breakdown, you can tweet it at us too and include a YouTube link.
Right. This is Johnny Lodden against Adrian Mateos at the EPT Grand Final, and they're four-handed, so a lot of money is on the line here. Now, on PokerStars, this was a sweat with hand, meaning that you only see Johnny Lodden's hole cards. We're going to tell you what Adrian has because it really helps us analyze it, and it'll help you guys too. I promise it's better this way. He had Jack-10 of spades, and we're going to pepper that in. You're going to know throughout the hand.
Yep, and now we're going to stop the hand once or twice on the way through so we can analyze it as we go.
Well, Johnny's putting a lot of pressure on himself to do well here. How about we share some of the burden? How about we sweat with Johnny?
All right, I'll allow it.
Pocket fives under the gun. He raises to 160,000. Adrian Mateos calls in position on the button. Muhyiddin Ferez in the small blind. Also calls.
I don't need to be rude, but I'm not super worried about Ferez just calling out of the small blind.
Adi Al-Azmar, our qualifier, is in the big blind.
Yeah, it's fun. Everybody's in. You see, when you don't 3-bet, so much more. Now everybody can win.
Set, please.
Family pot. And an ace-9 3-flop. Ferez checks. Al-Azmar checks. Johnny checks.
Free card? Huh? What do you say?
No dice. 275,000 from Mateos. Ferez calls. Al-Azmar folds. He completely missed the flop.
So calling would be pretty weird here with a bet and call in front of us, and I know what I would do, but folding's never really been Johnny's thing.
Remember, those black chips are 100K apiece. This is a check raise to 715,000.
Aha, all right. See, now Johnny did raise under the gun, so he can rep an ace here pretty realistically. We're repping an ace.
Action back on Mateos. He calls. Muhyiddin Ferez folds. He had a 9.
Well, we got rid of one hand, and it was better than ours.
So heads up to the turn.
Seems to me the most wacky thing about this flop play is Johnny's check raise with 2 5s.
That is really, really wacky, and let's try to figure out why he's doing it. First of all, he says this to Adrian before the flop comes out.
You see, when you don't 3-bet, so much more.
So that indicates that Adrian's been really getting involved a lot, and Johnny's directly on his right, so he might be getting a little bit tired of it, but that's not really a good reason to do this.
Yeah, I think what's going on is Johnny believes Adrian is going to bet when check 2 on this flop pretty much all the time. It's a super dry board, so if someone doesn't have an ace, they're usually just going to fold, right? So Adrian's just taking a shot. And when Ferez calls, Johnny now thinks, well, Adrian can have anything, but Ferez actually has to have something, and because it's such a dry board, he kind of has to have a pair. So, but he never has a really strong hand because he thinks the amateur would raise here if he had a strong hand.
Right. So Ferez has at least a 9, which is, of course, what he actually has in Johnny Lodden's mind, and that's correct. While at the same time, Adrian Mateos could really have any 2 cards due to his position and his general aggression throughout the entire tournament.
Right, so Johnny can raise here because even if Ferez has a hand like ace-6 suited, he's probably going to fold to Johnny's check raise anyway. Let's be honest.
And if not on the flop, then he'll fold later in the hand.
Right.
So this scenario where Mateos calls, that's not great for Johnny. That's not what we want if we're Johnny Lodden. And to be clear, this is a very high variance play from Johnny.
And really, Mateos calling is also pretty high variance.
Yeah, with the old Jack-10 suited on the... well, so let's see what Mateos has here. He has 2 back doors.
Actually, 3. He has 3 back doors.
Yeah, he has 3 back doors.
I mean,
There's straight draws, and well, he doesn't have a straight draw yet, but he could maybe turn a straight draw. He could also turn a flush draw.
I mean, yeah.
The 8 of spades would be the best card in the deck for him.
I mean, I think the Queen of Spades doesn't suck
Those are
either.
both pretty great.
I like those cards
Yeah.
if I'm Adrian.
Here's the thing, though. He's not calling just to hit a backdoor draw.
He can't be.
He's calling because he doesn't believe Johnny's story, and there's a really good reason not to believe Johnny's story.
Right, because the question is, would Johnny Lodden really check a good hand on this flop 4 ways? I know it's dry.
Right.
But let's say Johnny had ace-jack. He's going to check? Let's say he had ace-9 or a set of 9s. He's just going to check? It's hard to believe.
He might check ace-9 only because he has the board so crushed, but with a set of 9s, he knows at least one of his opponent could have an ace, and that's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like Johnny rarely is taking this line for value, and that must be what Adrian's thinking too, because when he calls, while he does have the backdoor draws, those don't come in very often.
Right.
What he really has is position and hopefully, from his point of view, a chance to take the pot away later on.
That has to be a huge part of Adrian's plan. At this point, he's thinking Johnny Lodden has 2 pair or better, or he's got nothing, and I'm going to win the hand if he has nothing.
4 of clubs. Having raised flop, Johnny checks the turn.
We're definitely taking an interesting line. Usually we're supposed to keep betting there.
So Mateos bets 650,000.
Now this says to me that Adrian is not too worried about what we've got, but if he had a really big ace, maybe he would have 3-bet before the flop? No?
Johnny calls. And this hand's going to the river. With nearly 3.7 million in the middle, Johnny only has 2 million behind. The ace of diamonds pairing the board.
That makes it tougher for us to rep an ace, but also it makes it tougher for Mateos to have one.
Johnny checks again.
All in.
And the chip leader shoves on Lodden.
Oh, boy. Calling here and being right is the kind of thing legends are made of, but calling here and being wrong is so stupid and obvious that when you do it, you pretty much die of shame. I think this is a super easy fold, but for some reason, Johnny doesn't agree with me. Johnny knows just how aggressive Mateos has been. I can't even imagine the amount of dynamic and leveling that has been going on for Johnny to be even thinking about calling here.
Clearly a tough decision for him.
Now that Johnny's so suspicious, I kind of want him to call.
Johnny folds. Mateos shows a bluff, jack high!
Oh, you didn't have to show it.
So we have to ask, how does Johnny call the turn, and how does he even consider calling the river? And I think it goes back to what Mateos is representing. On the flop, we said Lodden's representing 2 pair or better. That starts to be Mateos' line and what he's representing when he bets the turn.
Right, because Johnny check raised the flop. So Johnny looks like he's got a pretty good hand when he has value anyway, right? And Mateos, would he really bet a hand? He wouldn't bet a 9, right?
No.
Would he bet just a bare ace? And it's never going to be a very good ace. It's never going to be ace queen or ace king, probably even ace jack, because he probably would have 3-bet those pre-flop.
Right.
So now it's like a weak ace. Hard to believe he'd really be betting that right here in this spot. And he also bets very small, which is interesting.
It is. So we get to the river and another ace comes, and now if you kind of take the turn out of the equation, it makes sense that Mateos would be moving in with any ace, really. But since he bet the turn after all of that flop action, it makes it so rare that Mateos would have an ace. It seems like he would have to have a set or aces up on the flop.
Right, so it's either a full house or nothing by the river is what we'd have to imagine. And I think that's why ultimately Johnny goes into this sort of intense tank with 2 5s for his tournament life, by the way.
It would have been maybe the greatest call on TV ever.
I mean, it'd be up there. Him and Davide Katai would be neck and neck anyway. It'd be amazing. And again, 4-handed at the EPT Grand Final, there's a lot of money on the line. These are major money jumps. And the other 2 players who are left, by the way, are amateurs.
Right.
So it's a really incredible spot for Johnny. But that's kind of works against him here too.
Right, so we have to talk about the context of this hand to really understand why both of these players did these crazy high variance things throughout the hand, and why Mateos would think this is a good idea with jack high against one of the best players in the world. And a big factor has to be these two amateurs who are sitting right in between them, these two guys. And these guys are both true amateurs. They don't really know what they're doing in a spot like this. If Lodden or Mateos gets heads up with either of them, they have a really good chance to win. Mateos has position on Lodden and the chip lead for this entire four-handed session, so Mateos is probably just going after Lodden in pretty much every pot, and he knows he can because of ICM.
Right, ICM meaning basically it's the independent chip model, but what it really means is the amount of money that it costs you to bust now versus hanging in a little bit longer and the money jumps that
and
you
it's
get.
even more than if you just plug it into a computer, because the guys you're going to be playing against are going to be amateurs who you have a huge edge on. So you're losing a lot of money if you bust in fourth here and you're Johnny Lodden.
So it makes this spot on the river for Lodden this high leverage moment where he's either going, if he calls, he's either right and now he's the chip leader and everything's turned around. And while Mateos still has a position on him, Lodden can be the boss at the table much more easily. Or he's out and he's sort of given up this unbelievable spot that he's in, where yes, he has Mateos right behind him, but he's got these two guys who just don't really know what they're doing, at least compared to Mateos and Lodden.
Right. So Mateos' thought process probably involves a lot of that type of stuff, but he also has to think once Johnny checks the turn, which is a really interesting play after Johnny check raises the flop, that Johnny's just giving up, and that Mateos can now win. Because his bet on the turn, like we said, doesn't make a ton of sense unless he has aces up or better.
Right, but if you're Mateos and you decided to call the check raise on the flop and Johnny checks the turn to you, you're kind of obligated to take a shot of some kind. Because you cannot just call with the hope of making your backdoor straight or your backdoor flush or trip jacks or something ridiculous like that. They just don't come in enough. So you're planning on bluffing at some point anyway a lot of the time if Johnny gives you the opportunity. So Mateos takes it.
Right. That being said, in a pure gameplay perspective, it doesn't really look like Mateos can represent that much, and that is why Johnny calls the turn and tanks for so long on the river. In the end, though, the ICM voice in the back of Johnny's head overtook, and the gameplay voice shrunk away, and Johnny ended up sad because of it.
Right. I mean, what can Mateos really have that he bets the turn and moves in on the river with and calls the check raise with for value? He can have ace-9, ace-3, ace-4 sometimes, and maybe pocket threes, and that's kind of it.
Right, because he would probably 3-bet 9s, he would probably 3-bet aces pre-flop, so his range is really narrow at this point. But the ICM just crushes you in these spots where the money jumps are so huge and there are amateurs right there.
So Johnny's in this horrible spot between knowing what the, quote, right play to do is based on all the math and all the spreadsheets, which he knows very, very well, and all the poker pros in the world can tell you, yes, you just wouldn't put yourself in this situation because of all the meta implications. But then also he's sitting there and he just knows Mateos rarely has it here because it's so hard to have this strong a hand because there just aren't very many hands in Mateos' range which are that strong.
Right, it's just a spot that you can't really forgive yourself if you call and you're wrong, and that really overrode all other thoughts in Johnny's head. And who knows what would have happened had he made the call, but it was incredible that he even thought about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Stick around because after this, we're going to look at comments from last week's video.
If you guys want to see another hand that has a play that really is kind of crazy and almost doesn't make sense but might end up working, check out Can This Play Possibly Work by clicking somewhere over there.
It's like right here, right there.
Somewhere over there.
It's a great hand. Mustafa Knit at the high roller final table. Great hand, PCA. Also check out our podcast and make sure you subscribe.
Last week we had a hand where Daniel Decranu outplayed Jennifer Tilly while almost outplaying himself, basically. He got Jennifer to fold a straight on the river in a spot where most people would never really fold. Daniel didn't expect her to have a straight, but he was certainly trying to bluff her when he had just ace high.
Indeed. Now let's hear what you people had to say about it. So Daniel Crossley said, is Tilly's check on the turn a mistake? Checking gives Daniel the option to bluff, which he does. Sure, she calls, and then she makes her straight, but why check call then bet fold with the straight? Is this hand just a huge mistake by Tilly?
The bet fold is a mistake, but the check call we think is optimal.
Yeah, absolutely. Like she has middle pair. She wants to give Daniel a chance to bet all his bluffs. If she bets and she's ahead, he's probably going to fold. This is a great time to check.
Yeah, it was a good check. That was not the problem for the hand.
Yeah. The river, however, was a huge mistake by Tilly. So you got that right.
The bet was actually good. The river bet was a pretty good bet. That's a way to get value out of two pair that Daniel might check, stuff like that. But folding was a mistake.
Yeah, for a pot-sized bet, for sure. Okay, the bold Imperator says, folding is one thing. Showing the 6 and then folding is advertising to the entire table. Please bluff me. Please exploit me. I will fold every hand you put pressure against unless it's the absolute nuts. Reasons why you don't show your hand at the poker table.
Gotta agree. I think unless you have a really, really good reason and you can articulate well why you want to show your hand later on, you probably shouldn't be showing your hand because you're just giving away information for free.
I mean, and let's think about who's at that table.
Yeah.
Tony G's at that table. You don't think Tony G's going to put crazy pressure on Gentili?
I mean, he was going to do it anyway, let's be honest.
Admittedly, but maybe he'll do it even a little bit more when he sees that kind of it. He's like,
Yeah.
"Why? She's just going to fold everything.
Yeah.
I'll just bet 50,000 on the river again."
Right. Yeah. Good point. Don't do it.
Yeah.